Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. President Zelensky has made a couple of really big statements talking about Ukrainian long-range weapon strikes and how they are going to be taking over Russia in a lot of the weapons and other productions. Not a lot of very good news coming Russian way, so let's dive into this and more news in today's Daily Ukraine News Show. Let's begin. President Zelensky had a great conversation recently with the media, and he came out with a lot of very interesting statements. One of the major ones is that Neptune and Flamingo missiles have been actually already used a little bit in the last weeks. And he specifically stated that they were used in conjunction. He stated that over the past week, I won't specify in what quantity our pair of Neptune and Flamingo missiles was used. The corresponding results can be analyzed independently. We're not saying it's a mass deployment of this pair. We're simply saying there has been use and there is the first tangible results from these weapons of ours. And this is great news to hear because I know everyone is really eager to find out whether or not Flamingo missiles are being used and whether Ukraine is actually producing them in the quantities it's stated. I do believe it does because they just needed to accumulate some of them. Palenitsa, that's another like a drone that is a jet-propelled drone, has already been used in dozens of cases, started striking enemy ammunition depots. That's positive because we've had various moments before, and now we're no longer talking about isolated incident. The second good thing, our missile drone Ruta has hit a target of over 250 kilometers away for the first time. It's a sea platform. Then he talks about the Firepoint, which is also a developer of Flamingo missiles, and also Luty drone, the one that recently struck the longest distance away for a drone in Tyumen. There was a mass deployment of up to 300 units, and that was a serious operation. So all in all, Ukrainian strike capabilities are growing significantly. I want you to just stop for a second and try to remember how it was at the start of the year and what was Ukraine able to do at the start of the year. So in a span of the whole year, Ukraine was able to fully revamp their drone campaign, and now it's doing these long-range strikes daily. So Ukrainian strikes are definitely could be a big factor that will influence the end of this war, together with support from Ukrainian allies. But President Zelensky also talked about some of the other things in this meeting. Mostly he outlined that Russians tried really to take over Pokrovsk during the summer offensive, but Ukrainians undermined that operation. And more importantly, they actually now turned this Dobropilya breakthrough direction into a big kill box for Russians. We will talk more about this in the upcoming frontline update at the end of this week. Additionally, he talked about the European Union integration of Ukraine, and he specifically stated that 26 states, except for Hungary, are supporting Ukraine joining the European Union, and they are already expecting to open at least 6 of the negotiations clusters in a very short time, despite the opposition from Hungary. More than that, he outlined that Ukraine is ready if Russia will decide to attack Ukraine's gas infrastructure. This will become relevant a bit later in this video. But talking about Flamingo missiles, Russians actually posted today supposedly the remnants of one of the shut down Flamingo missiles. So we have an additional confirmation that yes, indeed, the Flamingo missiles were used. It is stated here that they were downed by a Buk anti-air system. The missile was traveling at 600 kilometers per hour at this 100 meters altitude, which is a pretty common use case that we were expecting from Flamingo missiles. Notably, it's not a surprise that these missiles could be shut down. They're pretty bulky and they're very big and should be quite easy target for any more or less sophisticated anti-air system. The Ukrainian bet here is obviously on the saturation attack because it's a use of Flamingo missiles together with drones and together with, as you can see, other missiles like Neptune as stated by President Zelensky. So I'm not surprised by this, but it's just another confirmation that flamingos are in full use and are already striking targets inside Russia. Ukrainian strikes continue on Russian oil refining and storage capacity. Latest one being Ukrainian strike on the Russian gas and oil facilities in Volgograd regions. Ukrainian forces struck a Russian gas plant and oil pipeline station in the Russian Volgograd region overnight on October 9th, Ukrainian General Staff reported. Explosions and fires were reported at both Khabarovsky gas processing plant and Kotovo at the Yefremovka linear production dispatch station. More than that, FP-1 drones attacked the Matveyev-Kurgan oil depot in Rostov region. Ukrainian attack drones attacked the Russian Matveyev-Kurgan oil depot and the Rostov region this afternoon. In his interview, President Zelensky also mentioned that because of the Ukrainian strikes, over 20% of the Russian gas capacity has now been taken out. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in his interview also mentioned that because of the Ukrainian campaign, over 20% of the Russian gasoline production has now been taken offline, which is great news, and it's nice to see that President Zelensky is sticking to a more pessimistic numbers. But the strikes against Ukraine are also happening, and there are consequences to these strikes. Bloomberg is reporting that because of the strike that Russians have conducted on the 3rd of October, over 60% of Ukrainian gas production has been taken offline. And in my perspective, there is a lot of wrong with this statement. Now, can we imagine that Russians struck the gas production facilities? Yes. But Bloomberg doesn't really stop with reporting the fact that it has been struck, these production facilities. They start instantly calculating how much gas would Ukraine need to import to substitute this production. And this, I believe, is a over-sensationalization of this attack. Now, is this a painful consequence of this attack? Absolutely. This is definitely something we need to be considered of. But more importantly, we need to understand a couple very important things. Firstly, this is not first winter for Ukraine. They know how to disperse their energy infrastructure. They've been through this rodeo beforehand. Secondly, we're talking about strikes against the gas production, but just last week we reported that Ukrainian long-term gas storage facilities have been nearly completely full. I believe it was 97% full that was reported. So if we're talking about gas for the winter, usually it is being drawn from the gas stockpiles, and this can be still repaired. More than that, the fact that Ukraine is going to import something is not anything new. My position on Ukraine and Ukraine economy has been one and only one since the start of the war. With the start of the war, Ukrainian economy collapsed completely, and now it's sort of an animated corpse that is trying to survive. And to be honest, Ukraine is pretty much dependent on the aid from the allies. So if we're going to see that there's going to be additional gas that needs to be supplied to Ukraine, it's not going to be like, oh, Ukraine doesn't have the money, so they will not get the gas. They will still get the gas. It's just we're going to try to find a mechanism to support Ukraine. And more important than that, again, we're here seeing more of a sensationalism than actual reporting. So while I agree with this article and that's painful, I more agree with what President Zelensky said, that Ukraine is prepared to the gas infrastructure strikes. And more importantly, just today, the Ukrainian gas minister, energy minister, actually came out in the interview to some journalists in Ukraine and talked specifically that gas infrastructure is robust. And while it has been struck, it is now already being repaired. So no need essentially to panic or think that everything is really bad. I want to underscore one very important point about the support from United States and how I see it, because United States right now is an extremely divided country. People from United States know it the best. And one of the most important things that I do want to underscore is how much United States society and politicians have transitioned over this year. At the start of the year, we felt that there's been a lot of politicization of Ukrainian conflict, where a lot of the politicians try to get some victory points for their side. Thankfully, this is now not the case, and it seems that it is now becoming an absolutely clear-cut situation for the US society, especially underscored by the latest poll from, let me see, Harvard Scaps Harris poll. So as you can see here, support for Ukraine is pretty overwhelming. I want to specifically underscore these points right over here, which is the support of weapons being sent to Ukraine. And you can see that both Democrat with 72% support and GOP with 73% support are completely and totally in favor of supplying more weapons and aiding Ukraine. The only group that there is a little bit of a downside with is independents and others, who are probably either the communists or someone else that are simping for Russia. Overall, I'm so glad to see that United States is truly united in their support for Ukraine. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for not letting it off from your politicians and not allowing them to turn it in some kind of a political infighting between the two. This is thoroughly appreciated by me, Ukrainians, and everyone in the free world. Thank you so very much. President Zelensky also outlined that the production of artillery shells is growing incredibly within Ukraine and European states. Most notably, the investments into production inside Ukraine is bringing a lot more benefit than before. Ukrainians have introduced certain breakthrough technologies that were beforehand looked and frowned upon by the Europeans as quote-unquote unsafe. Well, now these technologies are fully operational, in work, and are delivering actual tangible results on the battlefield. And President Zelensky is stating that in 2026, Ukraine will match and potentially even overcome the production of artillery shells compared to Russia. Thank you so much for watching. Continue supporting Ukraine. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.